She's a business mogul, #1 author, and wellness expert.
How can I help?
And now Chantel Ray Finch and her amazing guests are here to guide you on your journey to health, wealth, and godly wisdom.
Time to level up.
Welcome to the Health, Wealth, and Godly Wisdom Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode. And today we are talking all about creating value, selling your business for top dollar, and how to create recurring revenue in any business. And I mean any. Some are more harder than others, but we're going to talk about all of them. I have my wonderful co-host here, John McLaren. John, welcome today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, let's just dive in and kind of talk about some of the biggest questions that people are just asking us on the regular, that we can kind of get people's to know what they're going to do to be able to, the art of creating value and selling their business for top dollar.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the biggest question when somebody has a business to sell and they're, sort of not familiar with business valuations and how that works and what buyers in the marketplace are looking for. They're asking, well, what are the different components? What are the main factors that, drive my business's value on the open market? How are people going to, dissect it and value my business today?
Yeah, and one thing that every business has in common that is to get it to sell for top dollar is that for a business to be transferable, to be valuable in the eyes of an acquirer, it has to be able to thrive without the owner. And so many companies, the owner is the epicenter, right? Like they're the epicenter, like everything. They're the chief rainmaker. They're the ones who oversee production of whatever product or service they provide. And so many companies that we're meeting with are very difficult to sell because, of course, the owner or the acquirer knows that once the owner leaves, and if there's nothing left to the business, you have to envision that the company is able to succeed without you. And so a perfect analogy that I would say, you and I both have kids, but it's that we have kids and our job, my job as a mom, your job as a dad, John, is to somehow get these kids to a point where they can be happy, functioning, independent adults. And if they've done that, then we'll feel good about it. They don't have to, play quarterback for Alabama. They just need to be able to be successful. They don't have to go to Harvard or whatever. They don't have to go to college if they don't want to, right? But if we think about entrepreneurship, we want to envision our business as our job is to get them to 5 years old, 10 years old, then get to a point where they can live without you. And if you've done that, if you've built a company that can live completely without you, then you've got a company that you can sell.
And that's kind of a good point there, and a good first place to analyze, like, what level of scale are you at? And really the owner could be irreplaceable at any level of scale, depending on what they're doing for the business. But a lot of businesses at sort of level 0 or level 1, whichever you want to call it, level of scale, they may be the business owner, the only employee. Literally, there is no business without that person. And then as it scales a little more to 5 employees, 10 employees, depending on what they've delegated, it may become less and less important that they're involved in the day-to-day. And I think what you're saying is the less important it is that you're involved in the day-to-day, the more saleable your business is, because it's something someone else can plug right into and it doesn't fall apart.
Yeah. And I will say one of the major lessons of building a business that thrives without you is to create a business that has recurring revenue. And it's very common for an owner to naturally become one of the biggest salespersons in their organization. I know I've done a talk one time and I said something like, now, if you are one of the top sales, if you're the CEO and you're also the top salesperson in your organization, raise your hand. And everybody was like, they were almost like happy that they were the biggest salesperson in their organization. Right. And they were like, me. And my heart just sank, because that's great, except if you want to sell your company, because if you're the primary rainmaker, then it's not much worth that much to anyone.
Right.
And so I want to kind of talk a little bit about recurring revenue, because when I say recurring revenue, a lot of people think, software companies, like SaaS. When I say SaaS, software as a business, software as a service business. And that's one form of recurring revenue. But I think a lot of people don't realize what some of the other ones are. And so I created this revenue. It's like 8 different ones. It's called Produce P, and it's 8 models of automatic revenue that's kind of coming in. And so the very first one is like the protection plan model. So like, you can talk about that with the home warranty, right? Like that's what, obviously we come from the real estate world, so we know that. So kind of explain the protection plan model in the realm of like home warranties of America for just a second to get people thinking of it.
This one, is kind of a service that in some regards is based on fear. And it's, playing to a customer's fears and providing them some form of insurance or warranty, right? So you got your termite and moisture companies that would provide a protection plan, a guarantee that you won't get termites back, meaning they're going to come out, take a look at the property every year, handle any issues that have come up. A home warranty is a great one. When you buy a house, there's these companies that offer home warranties, meaning if there's one of the appliances fail during the year where you have your home warranty, or there's a plumbing leak, or the HVAC goes out, in theory, they're supposed to come for a small service fee and take care of those repairs or replacements of major systems. So it's kind of, an insurance plan, a warranty, based on a customer's potential fears that they don't want to have a big problem come up in the future. So they're paying for this service that will alleviate that fear.
Have you ever asked, God, are you speaking?
What on earth am I here for?
In a world full of noise, opinions, and distractions, He's been trying to reach you. In Tune In, God's Voice, Your Purpose, it answers these questions. Hear God, find freedom, discover your purpose, make a difference. You'll finally learn how to know the difference between God's whisper and your own inner noise, how to reinvent yourself with every new season, and how to answer the question every person asks at some point. What on earth am I here for? If you're ready for clarity, direction, and breakthrough, this book is your guide. Quiet the chaos. Hear Him clearly. Step boldly into your calling. Tune in. God's Voice, Your Purpose.
Yeah. And the next one is it stands for the refill model. And so, we all run out of things, right? And so there's commodities that we run out of. So we all run out of razor blades if you're shaving your legs or shaving your face. We all run out of toner cartridge, and so like one of the things I always think of is, so for me, when I shave my legs, I don't use the girl razors, right? I actually use Mach 3. I think that one is the best one. And so part of it, like what I love about that model is, if you think about it, they kind of have you a little bit on lockdown, because like I don't even want to try a new one, because I already have the razor blade stick, right, that matches the Mach 3. It's a lot cheaper to buy like a 5-pack or a 10-pack than to have to buy a whole new razor. Like that's a perfect one. And in my opinion, they've done a really nice job of making it work. Once you buy that razor, right, you're way more likely to buy the blades that fit that razor instead of starting new. And, with the Dollar Shave Club, I mean, it's one of my favorite businesses out there, because it's like they've come up with a way that you go, look, you don't even have to think about going to the store to buy razor blades anymore. We're going to just send it to you every single month,
Yeah. And it makes me think of Amazon. Just my personal lifestyle or, spending choices. Every time you buy something on Amazon, it asks you if you want to subscribe and save, right? So there's a savings, there's a convenience aspect of it. So I've got all sorts of stuff on subscribe and save, shampoos, soaps, different types of food, pistachios I've got coming on subscribe and save. So you kind of just set it and forget it. And you do, so I've had a couple items where, okay, now I've got 6 4-pound bags of pistachios sort of backed up. I'm not consuming it as fast as they're sending it, and that's kind of when you think about canceling or pausing or whatever. But it goes pretty far of you continuing to pay before you even think of it again, which is why it's such a good model.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one is the outsourced service model. And that's where it's like recurring services that you would outsource, on the regular. So, for example, I would say like Geek Squad would be a good one. Anytime you have like IT services that you might have. I actually talk about in my book about believe it or not, that like a lot of times people think, the first thing when I say these recurring things, they go, well, I have a service-based business and you couldn't make that, work for it. And so I'll give you an example. One of our models, and I'm not going to go through all of the 8 models. You'll have to read the book to get all of them. But one of them is called the entry priority model. So do you guys ever go to Disney? Do you guys go as a family to Disney, John?
We're thinking about going soon, and we went a few years ago when the kids were very young. Like my
Uh-huh.
youngest doesn't even remember it, so we're
Uh-huh.
gonna need to go at least one more time, so he has that memory at least. My daughter remembers it, but yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
So they have it's basically the front of the line model. I call it the entry priority model. But you think about like if you go on Delta and you want to go to first class, you're paying more money, right?
Right.
But Disney has it where you get to pay to become at the front of the line. And so if
Yeah.
you think about it, that's one of the models that a lot of people forget about being able to implement. So for example, let's say you have an accounting business. Well, during tax season, your response time might be 48 hours or 3 days because it's a hectic time. Well, if
Right.
I'm the type, see, for me, I'm always the front of the, like, I will do whatever. I'm all about convenience. I'm always going to pay extra for being at the front of the line. So if my accountant said, look, if you want between 9 and 5, Monday through Friday, you'll pay this extra fee and we'll get back with you in 2 hours or less. You've got my business all day long. But
Right.
these are the kind of things like when people coach with us, these are the kind of ideas that come to the top of the head that we help you figure out. And when you read the book, I give all kinds of different examples of how all these different businesses really did a good job on some of different models, and they have that recurring money coming in monthly.
And it is important to book that consultation because we can talk about these different business models. And like you said earlier, a listener some might resonate with their business, some might not. And there's millions of different businesses, B2C, B2B, different services, different products. And, we really have to sit down with you and look at your particular business to see which of these strategies will work best for you. But it's so important to schedule that consultation to really dive into the details of your particular business and see how we can help you depending on your needs.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is really important is figuring out, how to raise the margins and raising revenue per employee. And one of the things that I have been kind of coaching people on, that the people that they've been hiring, they're not looking at their employees as how much money is this employee bringing in. And I'm feeling like more and more, instead of people, like if you're going to hire an admin, they still should have a return on income because they should be taking away those jobs from you so that you now can do more sales or whatever else that you can do. Talk about some of the things that you've seen where people are just, in busy season, hiring, and their margins are just getting so low and they're not doing a good job of kind of keeping these employees accountable. Talk about that a little
Yeah,
bit.
I think that's a great point. And I think that a lot of business owners don't know their numbers and know their metrics, right? And that would be a really important one for a business owner to know, right? Is like, what is the amount of revenue that I bring in per employee? Am I, achieving a 2, 3, 4, 5x multiple on each of my employees' salaries? And when you think about all the other costs of a business besides payroll, I mean, you need to be getting at least a 3x multiple on each of your employees' payroll to stand a chance, right? And really need to get that up 5x and beyond. So I think, the first thing that I think of when you say that is just, as a business owner, do you know those numbers? Is that a key performance indicator on your radar that you're looking at? And when you're hiring, you need to know. I mean, you're always speculating, right? You're hiring somebody new, and you have to speculate of, like, okay, if I hire this person in this key role, I should get X amount of return on that. But are you coming back to that? Are you reassessing that every month, every quarter, every year, to see if your speculation of what was happening is coming true? And if your payroll line item on your P&L is just getting out of control and it's not producing the extra revenue that you expected, how do you recorrect? How fast do you need to recorrect? I mean, you really have to be looking at your numbers on a monthly basis.
And the best way to get your numbers up is coming up with, I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples of people that we've helped. I've helped a carpet cleaning business where, they normally just wait until the phone rings, right?
Yep.
Instead, you can set up a service contract where every 2 months you could say, look, your carpets need to be cleaned every 2 months or every 3 months. We'll come out. You could even do 6 months, for people who like their house really clean or they've got a lot of pets, they might need to do it every 3 months. But it not only makes the business more profitable, but it also creates a more valuable company because it creates a more predictable company. So if you're an HVAC company, for example, and you do HVAC, you could have a set of contracts where you go every 6 months to change out the furnace filters and make sure the air quality is good. We come in and check your duct work to make sure that we clean it out every 6 months or every year. That's very, very attractive to an acquirer. And then you can actually predict how many people you need, how many trucks you need to buy, how many furnace filters you need to buy in advance, figuring out what
And
your next quarter is going to look like, because then you have a predictable business, and that's a whole lot profitable, and it's a lot more fun for the people working for you because they know what's coming. When you create these service contracts, it's kind of like a hidden gem where you can kind of take this service subscription model and you can inject it into the most simple kind of business.
and I just using HVAC as an example, right? I'm sure, I haven't done this, but I'm sure you could go on to Google or ChatGPT and say, the top 10% of HVAC companies in America, what type of revenue are they generating per employee, right? And so you get a good idea of what that number should be from that sort of research. And then you just work it backwards. Okay, right now my HVAC company's only getting half of that. Like, what would I have to do? What would my employee's schedule have to look like? How many appointments would they have to get per day, per week, per month to achieve those kind of numbers, right? And once you know the number of where you're supposed to be, then you can sort of reverse engineer where you need to get to and figure out where the problems are in your business that are keeping you from getting to those top 10% numbers in your industry.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, but I just, my favorite company for subscription model is the H Bloom. And, we talked about, in my opinion, one of the worst, and I have a good friend of mine who, we met down here. And I guess this is why it resonates so much for me, because he owns a flower company. And, he's implemented and he even says, like, the flower company is awful because it's funerals, graduations, birthdays, right? And then it's Mother's Day and Valentine's Day. But, the thing is that them coming up with a subscription model was what completely changed their company, because what they did is they figured out that 5-star hotels and restaurants and spas like to do real flowers. And so they went to these different people and they created a subscription model where they come and bring flowers on a regular basis. And it's such a great model for them, because if you think about it, think about the flower business. When you buy flowers, they literally have flowers rotting in their refrigerator if they don't sell them, right? Like, once you cut a flower from the stem, you stick it in water, you only have a few days, maybe a week, to not even to sell these flowers. So if you can completely change your revenue by creating this incoming stream, it's a game changer of that, what can happen when you add this, subscription model in place.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just really good. These consultations, this business coaching that we offer, sometimes when you're, living the day to day, you can't see the forest through the trees,
Can't see it.
So having somebody just look at it from a little more zoomed out point of view and just tell you something obvious that they see can just change everything. And sometimes it's hard for people, that their business is their baby, and it's hard to hear criticism, or somebody saying you should add this workflow or this work to your plate, when the person's already at their max. But you really need to jump on a call like that, get that sort of coaching, even if it's just 1-2 hours initially, to kind of see what kind of value we can bring. I think it's really important to have somebody look at your business with a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah. And if you go back to the HVAC example I just gave, we've helped implement this very, very inexpensive $100 a year service plan for a HVAC company. And we have one that we developed that was $100 for one, and another one that was $200. And it's just for the whole year. And they get a discount every time they need a service call. But they also go out and do like I said, with the furnace filters and the different filters in the house. But guess what? Even though it's just a small, inexpensive $100 a year service plan, guess who someone's going to call when they're actually need a brand new HVAC, or when their furnace breaks? They're not going to go to Google. They're going to say, I've already got a plan where I can get a reduction in price and I can get all these things. And we already know these guys because they come in every 6 months to fix our filters. That's who we're going to call and have them replace our new HVAC, right? So when you create these kind of things, yes, you've got that service call, but you're also building a relationship. And then once you build that relationship for the recurring revenue, even if that's a small piece, they're now going to use you when the HVAC actually breaks. So that's another piece to think about as well.
So, another question that I had was just probably what people are thinking at this point in the episode is, how do you approach the question of whether to bring on an advisor or bring in a broker if you're ready to exit? Do I get some coaching first? Do I just get a business valuation? Do I full on hire a broker to start selling it? Depending on where you're at in the process, like how would you answer a person who's really just unsure what's next? They think they want to exit, but not sure the next step.
Yeah. One of the things I say is, like, there's some things that when we're working with businesses, that's really important. Like, for example, when you sell a business and you want to use an SBA loan, your tax returns have to match your P&Ls.
Yeah.
So when they are reviewing and you're going to apply for an SBA loan, which by the way, 85% of businesses now are bought with using an SBA loan, they need to see that the tax returns and the P&Ls match. So that takes time if for some reason, which a lot of times they don't, that we need to go get that corrected. Well, the IRS takes a long time to get some stuff fixed. So that's why I tell people, it's like, when is the best time to plant a tree? And it's like yesterday, right? So you need to meet with us right away. Even if you say, I don't want to sell for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, because of the things that we're going to implement in your business are all going to be with the vision of when you want to sell. Even if you don't want to do it 5 years, 10 years down the road, there's things that we need to implement to make sure that we can get you the highest dollar. And
and I think that's a really good. I think I've seen a lot of business owners that are sort of afraid to have that first conversation because they know it's going to sort of bring to light their creative bookkeeping.
well, I want to
To be
share a
nice about it.
story.
Yeah.
I want to share a story that just recently happened. This is a true story. Someone called me. Her husband passed away completely suddenly. Like there was no inclination of him passing away, and he actually committed suicide, and she had no idea. And in her mind, the business was bringing in about $150,000. And, unfortunately, he ran everything. She ran the website, she ran the Google reviews, and she was getting in Google ads. But the truth is, he did the entire thing. There was not even another employee. So if you think about that, now the business is being sold for very little because the only thing they have is kind of the website, the leads that are coming in, and a few little things, but there really isn't much to sell. And so think about someone who's now spent the last 20 years building a business that they hoped one day they would sell for a lot of money, but because they've spent they don't have systems, they don't have processes, they don't have the employees to run the business, this is something very hard to sell. And so I think like you just said, we get into the weeds and we're just making money without going, my vision is to someday be able to sell this business. Why are you building if at some point, and like life turns on a dime. She had no idea that this was going to happen, and things happen you could get hit by a car. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can happen. You need to be able to sell if something does happen when we don't expect it to.
That's right. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
So let's shift gears and let's talk a little bit about a merger and acquisition, and talking a little bit about, a lot of times people are hoping that they're going to get, a merger and an acquisition but the thing is that most of the time they only want to buy 60% of the business and then keep you with 40%. So I want you to kind of talk about some of the transitions that we've seen where now the person is now an employee of the company, and how hard that transition is because they built the business to create freedom, and now all of a sudden they only own 40% of the business, and now they're an employee of the company, and kind of some things that could go wrong on that side of the chart.
Yeah, I would say that that brings up a common misconception that when you're ready to sell your business, you're for sure just going to get a clean exit, right? Like if I want to sell my business, somebody's going to buy it and I'm going to be done. I'm going to get my money and I'm going to be done. But to your point, that is not always or even regularly the way that it works. And in the best case scenarios, for some businesses, the owner is called upon to stay on for 30 days, 90 days. Like the last business that I exited personally, we stayed on for 90 days to help with the transition. And that makes sense, right? Everybody in any business deal ought to put the shoe on the other foot, right? Spend a minute thinking about what you would want if you were on the other side of the transaction, right? And somebody buying your business, they don't know the ins and outs of your business. It's a huge risk. It feels scary. Even if it's a giant company doing it, they really need your expertise. You've been running it. You know the business better than anybody to, help with that transition. And like you're saying, many of the bigger deals that we see incentivize you to stay invested on board with that transition more long term by buying you out of 60% of your business in your example, right? You stay on as a 40% owner. When you still own 40% of the business, in their mind, you're heavily incentivized to participate, to make sure the ship stays on the right course for the foreseeable future. And if you put the shoe on the other foot for a minute, it makes a lot of sense, right? They're taking a big risk on your business and they want you to stay invested. And that's the best way that most people know how to keep you interested, keep you invested, and keep you, as an active participant, really invested in the future of where it goes in the next few years.
So I've written a book called Fasting to Freedom. It's called The Gift of Fasting. And it really talks about if you want to do longer fasts, deeper fasts, if you're looking for freedom. And then I have about 5 chapters. I've written a book called Tune In God's Voice. We have the book and we have the Bible study. And again, in both of these, there's about 4 chapters all about fasting and how fasting can help you hear God's voice. So you can do the Bible study with friends. You can get a group of people together and do it together, or you can join us on Zoom or get the book and, do it by yourself. So hopefully you enjoy. Yeah. I want to give one more tip that I have seen that's happened that I want to make people aware of. So when you sell your business, you're going to have to sign an LOI, which is a letter of intent. And that's like an engagement ring, right? And you're committing not to effectively continue to negotiate with other buyers, that you're in fact kind of falling head over heels in love with one acquirer, right? And it's non-binding, however. But what you have to realize is that the letter of intent, because it is non-binding, means that either party can walk away at any time. And so there's a term now that's called retrading. And it's when a buyer changes the agreed upon price and terms right before kind of closing, like they're doing their due diligence. And so I'm going to give you an easy explanation. So like imagine that you're selling your car and you agree to sell your car for $20,000. You're signing basically a letter of intent for 2 weeks. You stop showing the car to anyone else. And then on the day, the buyer says, you know what, I know I told you 20,000, but I found a scratch in the trunk. So now I only want to pay 17,000.
Yeah, or they take it to a mechanic to have everything gone over and they find a host of issues they weren't aware of. Yeah, but
yeah. And I heard someone say like one trick that you could do is when you have someone, you can actually shake someone's hand and say, okay, I'm going to agree to this LOI on one condition, but we're not going to do any retrading. And so the retrading handshake is basically saying like, we're agreeing on this price, and we're not going to I'm just going to keep giving you information. And then you turn around and go, okay, after I've spent, 60 days doing due diligence, that you're going to now come and say the less amount. But on the other hand of that, there's actually legitimate reasons of why during the due diligence, the buyer says, look, we found out that your company's revenue is a lot lower than you promised, or there's hidden tax issues. And, so there could be a reason why they are making it legitimate. So there's legitimate side, and then there's like a leverage tactic where the buyer intentionally waits until you've turned away all the other bidders, knowing that you're too exhausted and then you just want to close, and then it's forcing a price reduction. So that's something to really think about. I wanted to kind of put that in people's heads to kind of know this happens. And there's legitimate reasons why it should be lowered, but then there's like bad faith ones where it's just a leverage tactic that people use.
Right. Yeah, and there's no way to completely avoid that, in my opinion. And unfortunately, there are sort of bad actors out there, buyers that use that as a strategy, and there's others that legitimately do their due diligence and find something unexpected and feel the price should be adjusted downward based on the new findings, which, again, putting the shoe on the other foot is reasonable, but I hate to see it when they use it as just a tactic. And that all comes to when we're representing you, just our ability to negotiate, right? If they come back and want to adjust the price heavily downward based on a very sort of unsubstantiated argument, then we're going to have a conversation with you and hopefully get your endorsement to stand our ground and say that this appears to be you just having us lose momentum with our marketing and now try to you know beat us up on the price, and we're not going to stand for it.
Yeah. And I want to give you one more analogy. I know I give a lot of real estate analogies, and it's just because I've been in the industry for so long,
Sure. I
but
mean, real estate is the best place to, cut your teeth for business sales, right? You're doing deals, and they're very similar transactions. So I think real estate is the best prerequisite for business sales, and that's the background we both come from. So
yeah, and if you've ever thought about, if you're a real estate agent or if you ever thought about getting into business brokering, we'd love to have you on our Canzel business broker team. We have so much to offer you, and we are looking for people to join our team right now. And it's really, I'm telling you right now, I always say this, but as far as what Wayne Gretzky says, take a look at where the puck is going, not where it is right now. More baby boomers are going to be retiring and selling their business in the next 5 to 10 years than ever in the history of America.
and I
So,
would say that people who are selling their business, when you bring up the real estate analogy, if you're selling your house, you pretty much know what to do, right? There's a realtor in your neighborhood, your area, you probably know one. You don't have to think too hard about what should I do next when I have to sell my home. But when you're ready to sell your business, maybe not as straightforward, maybe not something that the average person knows exactly where to look, where to turn, who to get advice from. So I think you know, really important to make sure you go with a good and reputable company when it's time.
yeah, and there's so like when you decide to sell your home, sometimes you might stage your house for sale. And that is just basically moving the furniture around, maybe doing a little bit of light things. But then there's another piece of renovating your kitchen, right? And that's two approaches that can both increase the value of your home. But when we're talking about selling your business, right? You can look at it of, okay, there's some things we're going to do that are going to be more like staging your house for sale or your business for sale. And then there's some things that you're talking about where we're actually renovating the kitchen, right? And so for me, I want to get you there's things that we can do that can get you 5 times EBITDA for a business, 10 times EBITDA for a business. So that's what I'm talking about as far as like renovating the kitchen. There's things that we can meet with you and coach you on that is going to completely change the way that things go. And back to what I said about the automatic revenue, where you are creating a recurring revenue, the money that you have in your business that's recurring revenue is 3 times more valuated at least on EBITDA versus just doing the, 1 time, 2 time, okay, now we're going to just sell this to an individual buyer. It's a whole new thing on the acquisition number that you're going to be able to get.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, I want to talk about retained earnings real quick and just anything that you've seen as far as for businesses, as far as when they're selling their business, any other last minute tips that you can tell people while we wrap up?
Yeah, I think retained earnings, owner salaries, anything that falls into kind of splitting the funds that are coming into a business sort of directly into the owner's bank account or staying in the business bank account, right? that's an important part for us to look at. And like we talked about with your P&L matching your tax returns, that's sort of the initial consultation
Mhm.
is like, let's open up the hood and really see what you've been doing from a bookkeeping standpoint, because some of the things that you do to reduce your tax obligation year to year, they help you in the short term and they hurt you in the long term when we go to
Absolutely.
look at how you've been keeping your books. And I think the retained earnings or owner's salary is part of a bigger picture of just bookkeeping in general and what's been done. And sometimes we, consult with somebody and then we come up with a longer term plan that gets everything a little bit more attractive in that regard. Now, you know, uh, a new buyer has to look at those type of things and say, okay, well, we've got retained earnings by the owner on their P&L and L and their tax returns, and I could plug in an employee and kind of that money will go out the door. So the business income would stay about the same if I replace the owner with an employee, if they've been doing their taxes that way, if they've been taking a salary or retained earnings. But yeah, I mean, that's a really good point and a much broader topic.
And we will
Um,
talk about that next time.
yeah,
I would love for you guys to get my book. It is out and ready to go. And I will tell you, it's filled with all kinds of ideas for you. I'm so excited to share all that knowledge with you. And you guys stay tuned. We've got another episode coming up in just a few. Bye bye for now.